It began on what should have been a routine morning. The kind of day where everything looks ordinary on the surface: bright fluorescent lights, crowded terminals, families lining up with oversized suitcases, business travelers typing frantically on laptops while sipping lukewarm coffee. The overhead speaker crackled with boarding announcements, and people rushed past one another, lost in their own small dramas. But in the middle of all this noise and movement, something quietly began to unfold. Something that no one could have predicted, but no one would forget. Marcus Reynolds walked calmly through the airport with measured steps. His presence didn't scream for attention, but it didn't go unnoticed. A man in his early 40s, with deep-set eyes, closely cropped hair, and a well-groomed beard. His navy blue suit fit perfectly, not flashy, but clearly expensive. His shoes gleamed as if they had just been polished. He walked with the quiet authority of someone who had long stopped needing to prove himself. Marcus wasn't new to airports. He traveled often, too often, perhaps. Conferences, board meetings, investor summits. He was used to luxury lounges, short security lines, and first-class boarding. It wasn't about ego. It was about efficiency, about keeping his focus intact as he moved from one city to another, building businesses that employed thousands. But today's flight was different. As he approached gate C-19, he already sensed it. A slight tension in the air. A gate agent who seemed a little too alert. People say energy is everything, and Marcus had learned to read a room faster than most. It was part of what made him successful. And right now, something was off. He handed his phone to the agent, displaying his boarding pass. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with tightly tied hair and a name tag slightly crooked on her blazer. She didn't even greet him. Her eyes went straight to the screen, then to Marcus's face, and then back to the screen again, her brows slowly knitting together. "This says first class," she said, her voice neutral but firm. "Yes," Marcus replied. "Seat 1A. A pause. Just long enough to be awkward. "Are you sure this is your ticket?" Her tone had shifted slightly. What had been procedural now felt personal. The question didn't make sense, it was already scanned, and the system confirmed his seat. But the doubt in her voice made it clear, she didn't believe this man, this black man in a suit, belonged in first class. Marcus didn't react. Years of experience had taught him that calmness was his greatest armor. "You can check my ID." She glanced at it briefly, barely reading the name. Her hand hesitated over the scanner, then she turned to her colleague and whispered something under her breath. He leaned in, looked at Marcus, then at the screen. Their exchange wasn't long, but the message was clear. Something about him didn't fit their expectations. That's when they called security. Two uniformed officers approached from the side. One tall, broad-shouldered, with a rigid jaw. The other younger, clearly less comfortable with what he was being dragged into. As they walked toward Marcus, other passengers began to notice. Eyes turned. Conversations paused. Someone lowered their headphones. A child looked up from their iPad. "This man is attempting to board first class with a suspicious ticket," the gate agent announced, louder than necessary. Marcus turned to her, his voice calm. "Suspicious how?" "It scanned correctly." "We've seen fake tickets before," she replied sharply. "This isn't about you, it's policy." But it was about him. That much was clear. The taller officer stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us for verification." "There's no need," Marcus replied. "You can check your system. Everything is valid." The officer didn't budge. The younger one looked unsure. Passengers were watching now. Some whispering. Others recording. "This doesn't make sense," said a woman a few rows back. "He's clearly not causing trouble." But the agent ignored her. "You can call whoever you want," she said to Marcus. "You're not getting on this flight." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply pulled out his phone, searched for a name, and made a call. It rang only once before it was answered. He stepped slightly away from the gate, keeping his voice low but clear. No emotion. No threats. Just calm, precise words exchanged with someone on the other end. Someone who listened. And understood. The security officers didn't move. Not yet. The tension in the air grew heavier. 3 minutes later, something changed. A corporate vehicle pulled up outside the terminal. 4 individuals in business attire entered the gate area, their badges marked not with airport security logos, but with the emblem of the airline's executive branch. They walked directly to the gate agent. "Are you the employee who stopped Mr. Reynolds from boarding?" one of them asked. The agent blinked, visibly nervous now. "Yes, but You're relieved of duty." "Effective immediately," the woman in the suit said. No emotion. Just precision. The agent froze. "I was following protocol." "No," the woman replied. "You were following bias." Then she turned to Marcus. "Mr. Reynolds, we sincerely apologize. Your seat is ready. We've arranged a full upgrade, a private cabin, and a future flight voucher." Marcus looked at her, nodded once, and without a word to the gate agent, walked through the boarding tunnel. The silence in the terminal was absolute. People stared. Some in shock. Some in embarrassment. Some, perhaps, in quiet admiration. What they didn't know, what most would never know, is who Marcus had called. And what would happen next would shake the foundations of the airline's internal culture. Because this wasn't just about one man. This was about a system. And now, that system was about to be exposed. The phone call Marcus Reynolds made wasn't loud. It didn't involve threats or shouting. There was no demand, no show of power. Just a quiet conversation between a man of influence and someone on the other end who understood the weight behind the words. And yet, within minutes, that one call sent a shockwave from Gate C-19 to the highest offices of the airline's corporate headquarters. You see, Marcus wasn't just a frequent flyer. He wasn't just a successful CEO. He was a major stakeholder in the airline itself, a silent force behind the brand, with a direct line to the executive board. He had helped fund their expansion into international routes. He sat in quarterly strategy briefings. His signature was on contracts the gate agent would never see. And now, because of a moment of unchecked bias, that very airline was in crisis mode. The 4 executives who arrived weren't just there to apologize, they were there to contain the damage. They knew exactly who Marcus was. They knew what it meant to delay his flight. And more importantly, they knew what it meant to humiliate him in front of passengers and cameras. Because while Marcus never once raised his voice, the passengers around him had already started recording. Multiple angles. Audio included. Some clips already uploaded before the plane even took off. By the time Marcus settled into his now private first-class cabin, the videos were already circulating on social media platforms. Short, shocking, and very real. The next day, headlines exploded. Tech CEO denied first-class boarding due to racial profiling. Investor calls airline execs mid-gate confrontation. Suspicious ticket, airline faces accusations after CEO stopped from boarding. It wasn't just one story, it became the story. Marcus, however, remained silent. No press conference. No emotional Instagram post. No interview circuit. Because Marcus understood something few people in his position grasp: sometimes, silence is louder than outrage. Inside the airline, things unraveled quickly. The CEO called for an emergency board meeting. Legal advisors were consulted. Crisis teams began drafting internal memos and media statements. The employee at the gate was immediately suspended, but Marcus had not requested that. He hadn't even mentioned her name. What he had done, however, was initiate an internal audit, not of finances, but of culture. Behind closed doors, Marcus delivered a private presentation to the board. In it, he outlined a pattern, not just in this airline, but across the industry. A pattern of biased assumptions, microaggressions, and outdated protocols. He presented real data, testimony from other high-status travelers of color, and analytics on customer trust. But more than that, he presented a challenge. Do we want to be known for speed and affordability, or integrity and intelligence? That question echoed in the boardroom like a warning bell. Within a week, the airline had launched a complete policy overhaul. Every frontline employee, from gate agents to flight attendants, was now required to complete an intensive training program on racial bias, cultural sensitivity, and customer respect. The company began implementing new AI-assisted monitoring tools, not to spy on employees, but to flag behavior patterns that showed disproportionate incidents by race or gender. It wasn't just about fixing a moment, it was about changing the system that allowed that moment to happen. Meanwhile, the public waited for Marcus to speak. And eventually, he did. Not with a video. Not with a dramatic story. Just a single written post. I wasn't surprised. I was disappointed. I've spent my life building systems, technological, financial, cultural. But some systems still resist being rebuilt. What happened at Gate C-19 wasn't new. But what happened after, that was progress. Calm isn't weakness. It's control. And sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room doesn't need to shout. The post went viral. Celebrities shared it. CEOs responded. Thousands commented, not with outrage, but with reflection. Stories poured in from others who had experienced something similar but never had the platform, or the power, to push back. Marcus's quiet resistance had opened a door for others. In the following months, multiple airlines reviewed their customer service protocols. Training companies saw a spike in corporate bookings for unconscious bias workshops. A few airports even invited Marcus to consult on better hiring and training practices, not because of his fame, but because of his mind. And all of that started because one man chose not to argue. Not to escalate. But to act, with precision, intelligence, and purpose. This story isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. It's a reminder that change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives dressed in silence, walking confidently in polished shoes, handing over a ticket, and waiting to see how the world responds. And when the world chooses wrong, then the world learns. One mistake at a time. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who still believes staying calm is weakness. Leave a comment with your thoughts, we want to hear from you. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We tell stories that matter, because dignity, respect, and truth are worth telling.